let's now move to some covered mechanism and some regime change policies. In Washington Bullets, you examined the mechanism of regime change. Do you see contemporary interventions as extension of classical imperial practice, or as structurally distinct phenomena that aim to shape the global governance system? We will move to some contemporary examples about Venezuela, but just let's stick to the conceptual notes here. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I have to write a new book because Washington Bullets seems a little dated now. I mean, we seem to be living in the age of Washington's
Yeah.
missiles. It's slightly different. This needs to be part two. And the reason I say that is I agree. I know, I have a feeling I know where you are going with your questions because in a way, this is a very interesting situation we are in, where the United States um, finds itself with two beliefs. One is there are countries where the United States has prepared the terrain sufficiently, where through very very good homeopathic doses of funding the United States has built up a sense of cultural crisis in these countries. For instance, in Nepal, they've created a sense of cultural crisis. The concept of corruption, for instance, has been wielded to come into a country and really disaggregate the culture, break up the culture. People lose faith in their political class, lose faith in the whole country, and so on. And once having done that, you can start with new concepts, like you can say generational uprisings, Gen Z, with let the youth govern, and so on. And the concept of youth then is mobilized in these countries again to create cultural crises, that somehow the youth are different from the older lot. The older people don't understand them. They've been around too long. Let the young govern, and so on. And these mechanisms, very clever cultural mechanisms, are able to weaken societies, and you have a very quick shift of power. You got this in Bangladesh, you got this in Nepal. These are immensely successful examples of the weakening
Always.
or the eroding of the cultural confidence, where people think, it's just how everything is collapsed in our country. And you don't know how to analyze this in terms of global trade, routes, or the big structural questions. It becomes a question of your internal culture that is weak, and the need therefore for a new kind of leadership, youth leadership, and so on. That's one. Secondly, there are places, for instance, Iran, China, and so on, where this really hasn't worked very well. United States has tried to build up this idea that there are generational issues. The big protests in Iran or the big protests in China. The disgruntled people of China or the disgruntled people of Iran. That the leadership is too old. I mean, this comes from Donald Trump, who's like almost 80 years old. The leadership is too old, and you need Gen Z to come in, and so on and so forth. It hasn't worked in these countries. So these countries, you just go for the direct military confrontation, and it's a missile strike to intimidate. They tried this in Lebanon. There was the big protest movement backed completely by the United States, so-called Arab Spring, for instance. Yeah, U.S. ambassador goes to a protest in Damascus and says, "Bring down the government." Yeah. So what do you get in Syria? Okay, let's bring down the government. They don't understand the people. So what do you have? We're going to have Gen Z. What's Gen Z? Al Qaeda. Really a good idea, guys. Really good idea. We're going to go into Egypt, bring down the government. What are you going to left with? The military in new uniforms, yeah, or in Libya, no government at all, yeah, nothing, chaos. this concept of, like coming in and weakening the culture is extremely important, and at the same time dangerous, because the reaction to this can also go to the other extreme, which is that our culture has to be defended at all costs. And you can go in the direction of the far right in India, for instance. Defend the culture at all costs. It's this is our ancient culture. That's also not a very good way to go, because after all, our ancient culture didn't know how to fly a plane. Our cultures have to, in a sense, deal with the fact of science and technology and the modern world and so on. You can't just hide in the past. You got to advance. You got to be confident in our culture's role in the present world. So sometimes the attack is met with the return to the glories of the past, which is itself a kind of weakness, because it weakens you from producing your own science and technology. End of the day, you import science and technology and you become good at culture. That's crazy. And so, very interesting that there are few examples of countries that have been able to actually manage this scenario. China and Iran are two of them. Iran has a culture which it's able to refer to, but it doesn't refer to it in a reactionary way, because at the same time, Iran has built a scientific and technological, complete line of inquiry without having to import things. Now, some of this is thanks
Yeah.
to the sanctions. I mean, had there not been sanctions, Iran might have gone in a very reactionary way as well. It's possible. But because of the sanctions, you had to bring together the old Persian civilizational ideas with science and technology. Same with China. China could have become completely reactionary and said, we have a great civilized, but no, again, the fierce determination to bring in science and technology forced the Chinese to talk about culture and civilization in a very contemporary way, not looking backward, but looking into the present. So when we talk now about Washington's missiles, the reason these countries have to face direct military confrontation is that the West is having a hard time cracking the culture open, getting sufficient numbers of people, to say, I'm not just upset with the finance minister. You see, because part of the protests in December were inflation is too high. Okay, that it's a legitimate thing. Inflation is high, I'm upset. But the West misinterprets that as these people want a complete
Mm.
change of government. Not necessarily. People are upset that, frankly speaking, I'm not an Iranian, but I couldn't understand some of the things that the Iranian finance ministry was doing. I was wondering, why are they doing these things? It's going to create pain for the population. Then I found out, the background of the finance minister. I said, okay, he also, like me, studied at the University of Chicago. Now I understand what's going on. But the West tried to say that there's a crisis in the culture, that these young people, and that didn't work. That's not working in China either. It's not working in a few countries. But in other countries, this works very well. You don't need to go through direct military confrontation, because you can craft, through very precise use of media and so on, you can craft disillusionment with the whole of the civilization and create the basis for a Gen Z rebellion, which ends up overthrowing a government. And you see, in Nepal, you have a rapper, Balan Shah, the new prime minister, is a rapper. Yeah. But what's the first thing this rapper wants to do? He wants to ban politics in universities. Okay. He wants to ban political activity in universities. This is what the rapper, the cool rapper, wants to do the moment he comes to office. Okay. So you see, this creation of cultural, but by culture, you understand what I mean. It's a
Mm.
malaise that what we have is not working. We need something different, and what we need is something we see in movies. Young people in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with
Yeah,
that.
so in my view, the antidote to hyper-imperialism, as you mentioned, is not only to strengthen militarily, but also to strengthen the population in terms of their culture and to give them the highest level of understanding of their own civilization, of their history and roots. And I'm very happy that you mentioned about that. Let's now move to a very empirical example that we witnessed recently, the kidnapping of Maduro. Um, the repeated U.S. intervention in Venezuela, whether it's in form of sanctions, whether of it's in the form of diplomatic isolation, and now in the form of supporting opposition forces and the highest extremist way, which is to kidnap the main president of the country. These actions are often framed as democracy promotion. At least prior to Donald Trump, these actions were articulated as democracy promotion. Would you now interpret this action as part of a broadened pattern of imperial management over resource-rich states?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting issue because Donald Trump has sort of swept aside the language of democracy promotion and so on. Yeah. But in fact, he's clarified the language of democracy promotion because it's not like he's saying he's against democracy. He's clarified that what democracy promotion means is that you are allowed. And by the way, I'm going to take us back to Gaza to make this case. In Gaza, in actually in Palestine, in after the second Intifada in the year 2000, and it went on for a few years. After the second Intifada, after Ariel Sharon almost brought tanks into the Great Mosque in Jerusalem, in 2002, and then invaded Jenin and so on. In this period, the United States put a lot of pressure on Israel to say, you got to have elections in Palestine, in West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. And you're then going to have a partner in peace, and your partner in peace will run security for you. So you don't have to keep sending in your tanks. You just have a partner in peace based on the Oslo rules to do security. Okay, Palestinians said, fine, we'll have an election in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza. See how funny this is to talk about West Bank. East Jerusalem has already been annexed by Israel. It was part of the Oslo Agreement, annexed. Okay, so there was an election in West Bank and East Jerusalem. By and large, Fatah won, by and large. And they were the biggest party in that area anyway, and so on. In Gaza, it turned out that Hamas won the election, right? Hamas won the election in Gaza. United States could not accept Hamas winning the election. So they effectively started a war against Hamas. That's the first Gaza war against Hamas. Why? Why did the US and Israel go to war in Gaza for the first time? It's because the Palestinians voted for the wrong people. What democracy promotion means is you must be democratic. You must be democratic, but you must vote for the right people. If you vote for the wrong people, you are not being democratic. For instance, in Iran, there have been number of presidential elections where the United States has said we would like to have a quote unquote reformist president. We don't want a quote unquote hardline president. The Western media has an idea that there's reformist and hardline, and that only the reformists should win. Every time the quote unquote hardline wins, the United States said the election was fraudulent. Okay, so democracy promotion, not only now under Trump, but for the last 25 years, has basically meant you must be democratic, but you must follow our orders. So we've got to be very clear that this is what democracy promotion means. That we want to see you have elections, but you can only vote for people we think you should vote for. Don't vote for the wrong people. For instance, in Lebanon, it is unacceptable for Hezbollah to win
Mm.
elections in Lebanon. Hezbollah is not a military force. Hezbollah is first and foremost a political party which is a member of the legislature, the parliament in Lebanon. So Hezbollah is a legitimate democratic political force. But the United States treats it as a terrorist force. Why? Because they are the wrong, they should not have won elections. And that's the nub of this whole thing of democracy promotion. The idea isn't that you must have parliamentary democracy. After all, Iran can say, we have a parliamentary democracy. United States can say, yes, but any candidate can't run. That's the same as in the United States. All candidates can't run. You have to have the money to run. You have to have the backing of a political party to run. It's the same sort of thing. In very few countries can you run. In India, anybody can run in the election, but you have to put a bond, a bank bond on the table. And if you don't get so many seats, you lose your money. So that means you need to have the money to be able to run. That restricts, you know, so-called democratic
میگه تمام
engagement
سلام رفت
anyway.
میشه
In all countries, this is the
الان
case.
میوتم
Yeah. So why is it that, well, because the wrong people are winning the election. See, that the key thing isn't the forms of democracy. It's not the form of, you can yell and scream and say, in Iran, we have more women in the parliament than there are women in the US Congress. Okay. You can say that a million times, but they will answer, but the wrong women are there. You see, not the right, we have to say, we have to be able to, like a holy order, we have to sanctify the result. It's not the fact of the form of democracy, it's the content, it's who wins that counts. And in Iran, as far as United States is concerned, the wrong people keep winning, whether they are considered reformists or hardline. They have the wrong attitude to world affairs, and they are trying to be sovereign, which is by itself illegal according to the United States. And therefore, the United States will conduct an absolutely illegal war of aggression against a country that is merely trying to exercise its sovereignty.
Okay, let's carry on with the next
Yeah.
question, which is about the sanction as instrument of coercion. Would you describe sanction as a form of non-territorial imperial control, particularly within a financial global system?
Well, firstly, we have to clarify a few things. One is that any country has the right to make a decision about its trading with another country. Like if the United States doesn't want to trade with Iran, it's within its right to do that. Nobody's forcing the US to trade with Iran. United States doesn't want to trade with Afghanistan, doesn't have to trade with Afghanistan. Countries have the right to make decisions about what they do. The problem with what the United States does isn't that the US doesn't want to trade with Iran, but the US tries to make other people not trade with Iran. That's the extraterritorial application of sanctions. Now, that is legal, again, if you have a UN Security Council resolution that comes under, I believe, Chapter 6 of the UN Charter, which says that certain sanctions can be placed on a country. It is actually legitimate when the United Nations Security Council imposes certain sanctions to force a country not to be aggressive or whatever it may be. There is no UN Security Council resolution, but the US is still using its power to force third parties not to trade with Cuba or to trade with Iran or to trade with Venezuela, whatever. That is actually illegal. And that extraterritoriality is, in fact, a crucial part of the way in which hyper-imperialism works today.
So the next question is about the Greenland ambition. So the recent political discourse around Greenland, including the expression of US interest in the territorial acquisition, has revived the debates about territorial imperialism. Are such ambitions symbolic gestures, strategic positioning, or evidence of a revived territorial logic within the contemporary imperial power?
You put the question very well. Firstly, um, it's important to realize that Greenland is a colony of Denmark. So it's not like this is, a fight between Danish colonialism of an ancient kind and US ambitions today. So there are no good parts to this except Greenland's own ambitions for itself. That's the first thing. Secondly, the United States, since World War II, has already had a very large US military base in Greenland. So Greenland and Denmark's own independence from the United States is minimal. Okay, it's minimal. United States has a role already in Greenland. And the third point is the United States has been using these comments about Canada, Greenland, and so on as a way to discipline its NATO partners, to get the NATO partners to rise their own military spending, to become more effective allies of the United States. I mean, even with the Strait of Hormuz, Trump threatened the Europeans and said, if you don't help us there, we're not going to help you in Ukraine.
Yeah.
We're going to close down NATO and so on. These are disciplinary mechanisms. It's not like the United States needs to take over Greenland. It already controls northern Greenland and has the right to do whatever it wants. It can expand its base. It can do anything. Why would it need to take over Greenland? That was merely a disciplinary mechanism. The statements about Canada, I mean, he's not serious about conquering Canada. He's putting Canada in its place. Canada must understand, he's saying, you are not a real country. We control you. Yeah, you are a proxy of the United States. Denmark, England, France, you are all proxies of the US. Relax. Yeah. The United States says that Ansar Allah in Yemen is a proxy of Iran. Hezbollah in Lebanon is a proxy. Well, Canada, France, Britain, these are all proxy countries of the US, and this is a method of controlling them. If you don't behave, I'm taking Greenland. I'm just going to annex Canada. What can you do? This is a disciplinary mechanism. He's not serious about annexing Canada.